So much went on in the Virginia General Assembly this year, especially in the frantic last week to sine die. And we'll talk specifically with John McGuire and David Toscano about that coming up. But one of the most notable things involves our dear friend Chris Horner, the folks who had unearthed all of the funny business going on in between the Bloomberg Group through NYU and renting space in our AG's office. And the General Assembly has put at least clamps on that. Good morning, Chris. How are you, sir?
Good morning, Joe. Great, thanks.
So what did the Virginia General Assembly do? Take away the credit card? Take away his allowance? What is it that they did that's going to keep Mark Herring from joining in with Michael Bloomberg's little group of pro bono, quote unquote, lawyers doing the climate bidding?
Yeah, pro bono. You keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
Sonny Bono? I don't know.
There's actually a nice, timely story about the claim that these are pro bono, if you'll indulge me in a moment.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, another AG has gotten himself in a wee spot of trouble, and we filed suit just yesterday.
The words they use.
Yes, sometimes they matter, particularly when they're discussing six-figure compensation as pro bono. That has a meaning under some state laws, and courts may not take kindly to this, but more on that in a moment. In Virginia, we have numerous state laws that say that agencies shall employ the people who do the work of the agency, and those people shall be paid out of appropriated monies. And that involves accountability. I mean, that's one of the principal triggers for this. It's equivalent of these acts at the anti-deficiency acts at the federal level, for example, where an anti-corruption statute passed around the time of the Civil War, so that you can't, let's say, an EPA administrator really believes that the Congress is mean and he or she deserves a different staff and has a donor rent office space across from the agency to give him the staff he really wants, or the donor thinks he deserves, to emphasize issues of donor concern. That would be a big problem, and that's what's going on in attorneys general's offices and governor's offices, as I've written about for the Competitive Enterprise Institute. But at the AG level, we also have a very specific provision saying that the AG can have delegates and that they employ people certain ways and that they shall be paid out of the Treasury. And you can have a special counsel, but they too shall be paid out of the Treasury. So far you haven't heard the word Bloomberg or major donor.
Yeah, no, nothing in there, yeah.
And also if you need to hire a special counsel, you need to state in writing that you have to in advance and explain why. The case is in California. It involves some biomedical intellectual property expertise you don't possess. I mean, the policy has example reasons. So imagine our surprise when, as you and I have discussed, the Attorney General of Virginia applied for a Mike Bloomberg-funded, quote, special assistant attorney general to, in the application, and this is important, to advance the agenda represented by Bloomberg's group. Now, he actually wrote that, or his senior deputy did.
Bless their heart.
Yeah, well, this is the chief lawyer in the state, and there's an obligation to consult and to provide analysis and so on. So when we asked for the memo, where in the world did you come up with the idea that these laws that apply to you don't apply to you, and how this somehow slips through the cracks of laws that seem pretty clear? And they said, well, we don't have any records. That's why we're in court in the Freedom of Information Act case. But along the way, the legislature paid attention, to their credit, and it's quite clear. Anyway, I think it's inarguable that if Mr. Herring's party were given the responsibility, they would have let him go. Because so far in various states we have found, the Oregon Legislative Council has said, yep, this is illegal under Oregon's law. But there aren't enough Republicans to do anything about it in Oregon, and the Democrats don't want to. Same thing in New York and so on. So Virginia was really the test. And the General Assembly passed the test, and I'm very heartened. So they passed a restriction in Sunday morning when they voted out the budget. There was a restriction that supersedes all statutes, as I understand it, and it says these monies shall not be used in the following way, and in fact, here's how they may be used. And it lays out what the AG can and cannot do in order to close loopholes that didn't seem to exist to anyone. And so it prohibits what the AG, and here's where we get to another dispute, what the AG clearly did say he could do had applied to do, plainly intended to do, but keeps telling the press and even a judge recently, but I didn't do it, there's nothing to see here.
I wanted to, but boy, just because it happened and I wanted it to happen, don't imply anything from that.
Let me tell you something, Joe. We to pre-butt that, because this is nonsense. I mean, it depends on what the meaning of the word "it" is, and in this case, you did it.
Mm-hmm.
You put in writing that you can take these resources, a privately paid for special prosecutor at $81,500 a year at a salary they set, the AG's office, a network of pro bono, there's that word again, phrase, of attorneys to assist, and a PR, it turns out firm, but a PR staffer out of New York, all to promote the, quote, leadership of pushing these issues of concern to a major party donor and presidential candidate and new energy, as they call it, investor.
Mm-hmm.
So you did make this remarkable claim that you can do it, but in December of 2017, the AG provided, apparently, I've seen no retraction, the AG provided a long quote for this Bloomberg Center out of New York saying, "I am happy that we are participating in this program." So to say that, well, as there are those who say, you don't need to tie my hands on this because I didn't do it, but which time you're telling the truth, I would ask anybody else, because you've publicly said, I'm so happy to be doing it. And now you're saying, go away, there's nothing to see here, I didn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Which is it? Meanwhile, we have this very troubling application that says I would take these private resources to advance the agenda represented by your group, and then you tell us and the court that you don't have any records to back, that this was just something mentioned down at the water cooler.
These are not the droids you're looking for. Chris Horner is on with us from the Government Accountability and Oversight PC, and plaintiff, the attorney for the FOIA case against Mark Herring. Let me read this segment. Let me just say this is HB 1700. Except as otherwise specifically provided by law, all legal services of the Office of the Attorney General shall be employed exclusively by an employee of the office, an employee of another Virginia governmental agency as may be provided by law, or an employee of the federal government entity pursuant to an agreement with the Office of the Attorney General and such federal government entity. That's fairly clear. Don't start using outsiders to do government work, because whether or not there's force of law, Chris, if somebody sees a letter from the Attorney General's office, whether it was written by the Attorney General or some guy Mike Bloomberg paid $80,000 to, as it seems to be the case, you're going to sit up and take notice that there's some serious laws that you're going to find yourself in violation of, and doing things other than just operating your business. If I remember correctly, a lot of this was about going after and extorting either monies or complicity out of businesses that would support just climate analysis. Of course, they go under the title climate deniers. Did I miss a step in the middle, or is this still a fruit of that tree?
It is, but it's much more, and I'll explain why. This is about pushing Mike Bloomberg's agenda. We have emails from the California and Massachusetts AG offices showing this climate group of Bloomberg's that's putting these mercenary AGs in offices, saying that they've set up gun questions with AP, a certain reporter with the AP for the AGs.
Really?
So it's actually a Bloomberg group. This may or may not be related to the fact he sees a president in the mirror, but we do know that this is part of this enterprise to silence people that under our system are not to be silenced, those who disagree with those in power, and to get an agenda in place through means other than the proper democratic process. They're trying to use the courts, and in this case, it is a thoroughly inappropriate use of attorney general's offices of law enforcement, as if, I don't want to let this slip, the AG keeps saying, but I didn't do it. It is a thoroughly inappropriate use of the AG's office to send a letter to a major donor saying, yes, please give me resources, quote, to advance the agenda represented by your group. If you're not sure and you're wavering on this, ignore climate for a moment. National Rifle Association chairs a special assistant attorney general to investigate opponents of the Second Amendment. National Right to Life or the Family Foundation chairs a special assistant AG to investigate abortion providers. Suddenly, all of these folks who were aware of this, our constitutional watchdogs and our media watchdogs, who fawningly rolled out Mr. Bloomberg's scheme without a hostile question. The Washington Post announced it. It was so clumsy that the group has gone back and scrubbed references to Bloomberg from their website because they got a free pass, and it was quite clearly to advance Bloomberg's agenda. And when we finally pushed back, they went back and cleaned that up off their website because the media never pressed them. Now, how does this work? The way they would have pressed the NRA or the Family Foundation.
Sure.
And it should not have gone this far, but I truly, some faith has been restored here because the legislature did a very good job saying we've got, in essence, if you read this and you read our statutes, the Virginia Code, what they said they could do, they simply under law could not do, but it did not seem to matter. Now, my parochial interest, we're in court to get the documents because it is not plausible that the Attorney General's office would tell this to a major donor, knowing its own authorizing statute says, here's how you can proceed and here's how you can bring people in, without having gone through some exercise to say, here's how we get around this. But the legislature at least said, I read this as, our laws seem pretty clear, but apparently not clear enough, because while you keep saying I didn't do it, it doesn't mean you won't the minute we leave town, because you told this guy you would. And then this group issued a press release quoting you at length saying how pleased you are that you are doing it. So hats off to the legislature for doing this.
Yeah, well, it's the blind squirrel theory, especially when it comes to government oversight. Because a lot of times politicians, especially in Virginia, I was concerned about this, Chris, because in Virginia we've watched a lot of, quote unquote, rock-ribbed conservative thinking constitutionalists all of a sudden start to waver to the middle because they're afraid they're going to lose their next reelection campaign after what happened in 2017, maybe the redistricting that's going to come. So there are a lot of people saying, well, maybe I want to get on board this climate thing, or that they see the bags of money that Mr. Bloomberg's political action groups are going to be delivering to their opponents for later this November, and that's a whole other kettle of fish. But it goes without saying that this is important. But what do you think happens next? Does this filter out to some of the other states, or does Mark Herring strike back against this?
Well, there, just so you know, that is a real danger, what you described. And fortunately, the Virginia, at least the majority of Republicans, did not succumb to it. And that is, I had an elected member of a legislature in a neighboring state, an adjoining state, tell me that he did not want to take this up because he did not want to risk upsetting his majority leader and or Mr. Bloomberg. Now, this was an elected Republican, so imagine what the Democrats who are being approached with all this money. And if you look, it's my understanding Mr. Bloomberg played a very big role through his groups in getting certain statewide Virginia officials elected. So what happens now? First, consider Virginia. I don't know. Will the governor try to spare his old friend Mark and draw attention to this by saying, I'm going to bail him out and exercise my line item veto, thereby twisting the knife and drawing attention to the scheme that the AG, in a truly breathtaking fashion, said, I would like to do this. I'll take your resources, Mr. Bloomberg, quote, to advance the agenda represented by your group.
Yeah, that would happen if he won.
That would be, Mr. Northam and Mr. Herring, I understand, have had a falling out recently. Now, so I don't know how this plays out. Possibly they just want to whistle past the graveyard, but somebody has or will upset a major donor who clearly has. I have things that we've recently received from a neighboring state that we haven't put out yet that show the command that Mr. Bloomberg has over professional guilds of lawyers and elected officials in various states. So what do we do in other states? Well, we've just filed suit against the Maryland Attorney General for doing something similar. He applied, but unlike AG Herring, they actually won't release their application to Bloomberg. All of the other AGs, by the way, who released their application released it in full. They didn't run a paint roller over it like Brian Frosch in Maryland. And some of them may wish they did, Did I mention that the Virginia AG's application said, Mr. Bloomberg, I would like to use your resources, quote, to advance the agenda represented by your group through the AG's office? The New Mexico AG was just as craven. Well, Maryland's we don't know, but we do know this, and just to put in stark relief what's going on here. The Maryland AG set the salary, and he set the salary a little more generously at $125,000 in the application. And he told Bloomberg's group, I am authorized to do this, like they all did. Well, when it came time to actually doing it, after that happened, the Bloomberg group hired somebody at, oddly enough, the recommended salary level of $125,000 as a, quote, research fellow. But in their appointment letter, the hiring letter, they said, to be seconded to the Maryland Office of Attorney General as a special assistant AG for climate or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Well, 2 weeks later, the Maryland AG sends a 2-sentence letter to this guy saying, under my authority under Section F, which will become relevant, I hereby appoint you as pro bono special counsel. Wait, what? This is the guy who just before had said, hey, let's you and him get together. You pay him 6 figures. I'll appoint him to my office. When it came time to do it, he looked and said, A, B, C, D, and E, don't let me do it. The statute only goes to F, and F is pro bono.
Well.
And so the AG, this is a problem, you know.
Yeah.
Did I mention he's a lawyer? And the Maryland courts define pro bono. And oddly enough, it turns out it doesn't include 6-figure salaries from an outside donor to do the specific job that you're bringing him in for. So this rot extends. Fortunately, the legislature stopped it, at least for now, from coming to Virginia. But this is remarkable, and there's more there, but hopefully not here.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I take that back. Again, we're still in court to attempt to get the documents that, assuming the AG's office proceeded according to the various laws, these documents must exist. There's no way they proceeded to bring on a special counsel.
I mean, unless they
set the salary, said I can do it, without looking into it. And their own policy says we have to have a memo in advance saying that we can do this. Well, where is it?
Yeah, it's got to be. Somebody had to have responded somewhere along the line. Chris Horner from the Competitive Enterprise Institute and the Government Accountability and Oversight PC is on with us. Of course, huge victory in the Virginia General Assembly, catching Mark Herring red-faced. I guess, of all the things he's been caught faced with, that's the best. I'm not sure what Attorney General Headley Lamar in Rockridge had to say about this, but it is playing out almost comically. Their elite attitude towards the law is really something that I'm in charge of and doesn't apply back to me. It's almost stunning to me, Chris. When you got into law, think back to young law student Chris Horner and think about where you are now. Did you ever imagine people would view the law as this sort of personal profit-making weapon that they could use?
Well, in this respect, look, this is revolutionary. Obviously, I didn't. I took the vision of a Michael Bloomberg to see this kind of arrangement, and the reason I say that is, if there were precedent, we would have heard what it is by now. And so far, the only one that anyone has included is the Virginia AG in his application for these resources, quote, to advance the agenda represented by the Bloomberg Group. And they said, well, we bring in law students so we can do this. Now, Chris Horner, law student, was not paid $81,500 a year for the privilege of interning, or they're comparing them to interns.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, by statute, they actually are the equal of the Attorney General. Though, as the Journal has pointed out in a couple of pieces on our findings, these people know where their bread is buttered. This is inherently conflicted. Forget the Virginia-specific statutes, which, oddly, the AG said there are no Virginia-specific impediments. There are at least 4.
Considering he's our lawyer, you'd like to think he knows this stuff, but,
Or at least, and this is why, again, we're in court on FOIA, you would at least have thought, and it's implausible to say he didn't, look into it. This is where we're just shaking our heads, saying, now, wait a second. You operate under a statute, a grant of authority from the legislature. You, among all people, know what it is, or are obligated to know what it is. When a big donor comes by and says, hey, I'd give you all of these inducements if you'll only take my mercenary and put him in your office to pursue things of interest to me, the first thing you do is say, any experts here on what we're allowed to do? And give me a memo on it. And they're insisting nobody did. They didn't even check. And this is where we have a problem because, as we told the court, we believe they complied with the law. We believe they complied with their policy. We believe they complied with how we view the Code of Professional Conduct here. They had an obligation to consult the client, the AG. This wasn't a rogue guy. Or was it? They're claiming, in essence, their position is just a rogue senior lawyer in the office told Bloomberg's group something that he felt but never looked up. And that doesn't strike us as plausible. That's simply not how these offices work. It's also not what the statute or the code would imply. So there is more here in Virginia. We're confident. But fortunately, again, I can't say this enough because of the soft bigotry of low expectations possibly, but I didn't expect much out of the legislature. And they stood up and said, not here.
Amen.
That is so. Virginia's the only one so far. What's wrong with the rest of them?
Well, I think I may have there was a video that came out over the weekend, Chris, from, I think it's like the Sunshine Group or something like that. A bunch of middle schoolers, it looked like, in, of all places, Dianne Feinstein's senatorial office, buttonholing her on the Green New Deal, which we all thought was quaint and perhaps was written by a middle schooler. Maybe it was. That's why they're so impassioned about it. But I watched these kids spouting hashtags and bumper sticker sloganeering with a zeal that was frightening to me. And elected officials, this is the McDonald's axiom. You get the kids to come in, they'll bring the moms and dads. And this was very concerning to me on a level beyond just the law, but the lawmakers getting hit by these groups of kids and their moms saying, give AOC her Green New Deal, we need it now, or we're going to rise up against you. It was stunning to watch Dianne Feinstein actually try to upbraid these kids. Right,
and as I said at the time, it would have been better if she did that in the doorway in a robe and curlers. The whole tenor of that was a
rolling
extended
pin.
Get out of my yard, I know what I'm doing.
A rolling pin in her hand.
Yeah, but unfortunately, she then soon posted up her own proposal because Thelma and Louise is coming to life. Do you have a better plan? No? All right, we're off the cliff. That's actually Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's argument. Well, if you don't have a better idea, we're doing this. I'm the boss. I don't know if we should tell her, but anyway, Dianne Feinstein came up and said, well, I do have a better plan. Me too, just not as crazy. We'll do it in 2050. Now, just so you know, there's a battle within the Republican caucus on Capitol Hill. The Energy and Commerce Committee Republicans, which is the committee that really matters, are adopting the same idea. Well, they don't want to provide a target or present a target, so they're saying, well, me too, just not as loony as this. And other Republicans on, say, the Natural Resources Committee are saying, essentially, we have a lot more to fear from climate policy than we do from climate change.
Yeah.
Let me count the ways. So I'm afraid there's a struggle for the Republican soul on this up there, and we shall see who they appoint to this climate
commission,
show trial, whatever committee. But it's not a. Here's the problem. AOC ran with this because her and several like her were not possibly all that attentive in 2009 when this caused a big problem for her party. And she's so scared the other members that they were humoring her and giving her plum fundraising committee assignments and so on. But meanwhile, even the Washington Post reported more seasoned members were pleading with Nancy Pelosi, spare us from tough votes like the cap and trade vote that cost us a big role in costing them the majority in 2009. So people who have been there longer, I don't have a strange new respect for people who've been there longer. I'm just saying they know that this costs jobs, the jobs of people who vote for them. Now, the Republicans should dance with the one that brung them a majority for a while, which is how they played this last time. Because, why didn't someone think of this before? They have, and it played very badly for them, and the Republicans should stand up and oppose it. It worked last time because people, it is, I don't want to oversimplify it, but you can see in polls, people recycle and think, therefore I'm doing my part. if you want to press it and say, how much would you pay for no impact on climate, you would find out the number's very low.
Right.
It's a gesture, and if you add in how much would you pay for no impact on climate, and knowing you're killing seniors and the poor, the most vulnerable, through energy poverty, does the number go up or down? I mean, there's a lot that they. Well,
we have to dust off all those moments you and I spend together pointing this stuff out, Chris. I unfortunately have to let you go, but congratulations on getting the Virginia General Assembly to put the Attorney General, at least pro tem, in his place, and caught red-faced over this.
We're merely congratulating them, not taking credit.
Well, absolutely, and encouragement is the better way. You want more of something, encourage it when it happens, right? And we'll talk to you again very soon. Again, if you want to find them online, it is, let me see if government accountability is
govoversight.org.
Govoversight.org. I was looking at the press release and I couldn't find it fast enough. Thank you, sir. Best to all, and we'll talk to you again very soon. Dan Schneider is executive director of the American Conservative Union. So when I call him the boss, I mean he's the boss.
Well, I've got a chairman of the board who's Matt Schlapp. I call him my boss.
All right. Well, all right. You guys, the inter-office politics be whatever they need to be there. I appreciate you guys coming down here. And the reason I have Dan here is they've just put together a book. Is this the 50th anniversary of CPAC, or was that last year?
Well, we're almost to 50.
Almost
ACU
to 50,
is 52 years old. We were founded in 1964, really with the purpose of making the Republican Party more conservative, and then and to frankly get Ronald Reagan elected president. So CPAC was created really for that purpose.
So, and after the 64 convention, it became clear that conservatism was an important thing, but just didn't have the political feet that, like, some of the left-wing organizations were already meeting in, big gatherings and whatnot. So why not have one where we're all thinking about smaller government and limited liability there?
Well, the heart of our nation is the idea that people govern themselves.
Amen.
And but people had forgotten that was their purpose. They've got a responsibility to affirmatively take action to maintain freedom. Freedom is not the natural order of things.
What do you say to folks? And I've been going back and forth, and CPAC is always this place where we almost argue as to what conservatism is. And I go back to, the source. I go back to Russell Kirk and a conservative mind.
Exactly right.
And that's what I tell people. I say, go back there. There's nothing about deficit hawks or neocons or anything else in there. It's about preserving a way of life, period.
Joe, it's music to my ears. Conservatism is not a set of the outcomes. Conservatism is, in fact, an ism.
That's right.
It's an ism. It's a political philosophy that sovereignty resides in the person. Our rights are naturally ours. Government does not give rights.
Only protect them.
It only protects. Joe, you need to become a board member of ACU.
You sign me up. Where's my paperwork? So you've got a book out. I don't want to lose our time here because I know everyone wants a piece of you, and the vice president is arriving now. First off, I have to ask, you really threw us with the Air Force One sitting out behind here. I'm like, what, did Sully Sullenberger land Air Force One in the bay here outside of National Harbor?
Yeah, that replica of Air Force One has been there for about 4 months.
Oh, has it?
We didn't bring it here. It's the hotel is just about to take it away, but I'm glad that it's here.
It was really surprised me. I'm like, what now? The president will be here tomorrow, I guess, from what I understand.
Tomorrow.
Vice President today.
Here today.
And, of course, the necessary Secret Service. If you're coming up for CPAC today, understand the Secret Service is doing screenings, but you guys really have gotten it down to a pretty good science. You guys should run TSA the way you guys get everyone into CPAC through the security checkpoints.
Well, we've got a very good relationship with Secret Service now that the Obama administration is over. There were a couple CPACs when Obama was still president where he made life miserable for us.
Really?
Oh, my goodness. The long lines from
understaffed, I'm sure. Yeah. So what goes into the book? And I appreciate Reagan at CPAC. And
Reagan spoke at CPAC 13 times.
Wow.
13 times. And so this book has all of his speeches.
And until last year when President Trump spoke, he was the last time a sitting president addressed CPAC was Reagan, correct?
Well, George W. Bush did speak in his last year. Trump was the first president to speak in his first year since Reagan. So Reagan spoke at CPAC 13 times. If I were to simply say this book had his 13 speeches at CPAC, it's kind of like, what a big deal. Really
I can get
cool
those online. I can Google those.
Yeah, that's right. In front of every one of these speeches, we've got commentary to explain why that speech was important then and why it's important now. Each speech has as a unique person writing on it. So we have the Vice President of the United States writing on the Reagan 64 speech. We've got Ted Cruz, Mark Meadows, K.T. McFarland.
So their own take on
their analysis of why the 75 speech was so important, why the 68 speech was so important.
Wow.
Katie Pavlich. We have some of the best and brightest thinkers explaining why the ideas that Reagan expressed are still important today and will always be important.
And these speeches, and again, you talk about transcendent words. I mean, he made so many clear points that you almost want to. Oh my gosh, are these hand scribbled? I mean, it's like you've got his actually hand scribbled notes.
So in the appendix, so obviously your listeners can't see this, but you can. I'm turning to the appendix. You see Reagan's handwriting where he is marking edits in his speeches here.
Sort of like he did with the tear down this wall speech, where everyone said, no, don't say this, President, don't say this.
Look, Joe, you're seeing this. It is just amazing here to see his handwritten notes where he's saying, no, let's scratch this, and he takes out whole paragraphs and rewrites whole paragraphs in his pen, with his pen.
So it's way more than just a compilation. Dan Schneider is here, Executive Director of the American Conservative Union, our hosts here at CPAC, and I appreciate your visit, Dan, and your hosting, and continue good success with this. Is this in the bookstores now?
Yeah, you can go to conservative.org. It's also on Amazon and every place. It's published by Regnery. A fine publisher. We're really pleased with this.
Well, I'm honored. If you, how much? My wife's got my credit card. How much are they?
For a donation of $1,000, the American Conservative. No.
All right. Well, you know what my broadcast fee is. It's one of these remotes costs. No, in all seriousness, I really appreciate it. And if you're coming up to CPAC, which I would suggest you do, again, reminder, be careful on the area roadways coming up through Culpeper and up 29, because in between National Harbor and Charlottesville, it's more snowy than it is in Charlottesville or here at National Harbor. But drive carefully. But you can get it downstairs in the book room and everything else, because you got a big bookstore downstairs.
Yeah, it's big bookstore downstairs. And if you're coming from Culpeper, you're actually going to be driving right past Matt Schlapp's house.
Really? Stop and say hi. Check his mail, because he's been busy.
He's here outside today, but he lives out there.
Oh, okay. That was great. I'll remember that next time he complains about coming on the show early in the morning. Dan, it's been an honor to have you on here, but it's an honor also to come here and meet all the folks and hear all the folks. Looking forward to the Vice President's speech somewhere, I guess, between 9 and 10 or 10 and 11.
10 o'clock is when he's scheduled.
Okay, scheduled to come on.
He'll go on when it's time for him to go on.
Yeah, that's right. But anyway, thank you so much for coming and stopping by, and thank you for putting together this book. It's definitely on a Christmas gift-giving list.
Hey, thanks, Joe.
Thank you. Dan Schneider, American Conservative Union. Joe Thomas in the morning at CPAC 2019. Joining us now here from the Heritage Foundation, Hans von Spakovsky. Hans, it's always great to catch up with you here at CPAC. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great. It's actually nice to see you in person instead of talking to you just on the phone.
It's one of those rare moments I get to. Is that what you look like, really?
Right.
So you're.
Don't be too disappointed.
No. That's right. We talk about so many different things, but I wanted to hit you up with something really obscure, because we have somebody running for the Virginia House of Delegates in Charlottesville who is a proponent of weighted voting. What do you first, second, third, fourth choice?
Right.
How many places around the country use that? Because you hear about it in some of these primaries. I know a lot of conventions will do it to get a nominee for something. But how many straight out elections in November?
I think there's only like half a dozen. Mostly small towns that do this kind of thing, and I don't think it's a good idea.
Well, it's a race to number two. You want to be everybody's number two.
That's right. It's a race to number two, and I think that the whole concept we have of wanting a majority voting for somebody instead of just a plurality is a good idea. That's the kind of person you want in office. Plus, I got to tell you, voters, from my experience, just find it extremely confusing, and they don't really like it. So I just think it's not a good idea.
We've been watching this rampant populism, and I was on a bit of a bent on Thursday morning about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, or as our friend Rick Manning calls her, Shay OC. And her interrogation of Michael Cohen exposed something for me that I've been kind of fearing on the march for some time, which is sort of our own American version of the French Revolution.
I agree.
Yeah. Oh, do you? Okay, so I'm not nuts.
No, I do agree.
Hans agreed with me because everything was about this rich guy getting breaks from the government.
Right.
It kind of goes. It dovetails off of her whole screed about Amazon and the tax incentives they got out of her district, whatever, and portraying it as if. And I worry that this is whether Trump is playing the King Louis role or not, but this is, gather up a bunch of less miserables and let's storm the Bastille because these guys are the reason you're poor is they have stuff. And I don't know where it ends because it usually devolves into if you own a business, you're a greedy rich guy. If you have a talk radio show, you're a greedy rich guy. If you're a lawyer, you're a greedy rich guy. I mean, it's a never-ending cycle.
She's using exactly the same kind of language and concepts and views that you not only saw in the French Revolution, but we saw in the Bolshevik Revolution. And people should look at that and see what happened, and particularly the most recent one, which my family has experience with.
Oh, do you?
The Russian Revolution.
Oh, yeah.
Because my father was Russian. Think about what they replaced it with the kind of dictatorial government that, based on the kind of language you hear from Ocasio-Cortez and others, they seem to think there's nothing wrong with the government wisely telling us what to do from birth to death on absolutely everything.
Well, I tied it into the vote that was cast on Wednesday regarding common sense background checks on Second Amendment privileges.
Yes.
And privileges, just the word alone. I mean, they get me using it because that's the language they use.
Yeah, the Second Amendment is not a privilege. It is a right.
God gives us these. Your job is to protect them, but we've lost that ability. We seem to be voting for, I don't want to hear somebody say something mean, so I'm fine with some regulatory commission over the First Amendment. Right. I don't think you should be able to build that there, so I don't want my Fifth Amendment right over my property, or he has too much land.
Right.
Go ahead, build it there. Just take his property because he has too much.
Well, listen, Joe, I'll give you a good example of the hypocrisy of the left that's related to this issue, and that is, folks on the left keep pushing that they've got a federal law now that does it. They just voted to do this in Florida to restore the rights of felons to vote the moment they're out of prison.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So they are all saying, these felons, they've paid their debt to society, and they need to get their right to vote back. But when you say to those same people, okay, you now trust these individuals in the voting booth, does that mean you also believe that we should get rid of the federal statute and the state statutes that say that a felon can't own a gun? Do you trust them in the voting booth, but you don't trust them on the streets of your city to own a gun? And they always look at me like I'm shocked. Well, my gosh, we can't let felons have their right to own a gun back. Oh, but you trust them to go vote.
It's a daunting time. It's exciting for me because there's so many instances where the left has pushed it so far that it's almost like that video that came out over the weekend of the fifth graders buttonholing Dianne Feinstein over the Green New Deal,
right.
which of course, if you read it, sort of reads like they wrote it, but
yeah.
but they've all got their card with their slogan on it, and it's a crisis, and we have to do this right now. If not now, when? Those kind of things scare me, because that's the visual that drives people into the voting.
You know what
booth.
I would have liked to have asked those fifth graders? I would have liked to said, well, how many of you would like to visit Walt Disney World in Florida? And I'm sure every one of them would have raised their hands. And then I would have said, well, you realize that one of the proponents, Representative Ocasio-Cortez, says that one of the purposes and intentions of this Green Deal is to basically get rid of air travel in the United States. And I'm sure those kids have no idea that that's part of what's going on.
But it's the McDonald's stratagem. At CPAC, the Honorable Jason Isaac. No, not that one. He is former...
not the actor.
Although he's going to use that to help book some of the spots here at CPAC. Jason Isaac is former Texas representative.
Correct.
Member of the Texas House. First and foremost, can I tell you this? And I only learned about this recently. I love what you guys are trying to do with deregulating electric utilities.
Yes.
I don't know if you had anything to do with it or not. But,
no, absolutely. We fought for that. We've got 28 million people approximately in the state of Texas, and 20 million of them have the option to choose their electric provider. So you've got 8 million people that are locked into either a co-op that they're an owner of, so they have some ownership and they get to elect the board of a co-op. I'm a big fan of co-ops. Mm-hmm. And then you have other people that are locked into municipal run utilities, like in the city of Austin or the city of Georgetown. And I'm glad you brought this up, because the city of Georgetown, not the one in Washington, D.C., but the city of Georgetown, just north of Austin, about 65,000, 70,000 people. Their mayor, Republican, has touted going 100% renewable.
He
was kind of the show pony for the left, getting taken around the country and around the world with Al Gore talking about this inconvenient truth. Well, the inconvenient truth has come home to roost, because now they're $30 million in the hole because they bought too much electricity and they can't sell it on the open market. And so they're really not 100% renewable, they're 200% renewable, and their citizens are on the hook for $1,200 per family. They have some of the highest electric rates in the state of Texas, in the city that I used to represent, which is not even 100 miles south of them, pays half the cost of their electric bills.
Man.
Because they've gone, we want to find the most reliable, most affordable electric for their customers, and they did that. But Georgetown didn't follow that. They don't have a competitive market. They need a competitive market. Their consumers, their constituents should be able to choose their provider.
A friend of mine told me the difference between conservatives and liberals is liberals will actually, conservatives will actually say, I'm for the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, but I would really like to see Dominion lose its, protected status as a monopoly. You can't have it both ways. Yes, you can. That's what makes us conservatives.
Yeah.
Now, talk about the Green New Deal, because you work with a group called the Texas Public Policy Institute.
Yeah, the Texas Public Policy Foundation, and we've got 12 different projects around the country where we're actually doing a lot of work outside of the state of Texas. Criminal justice reform, Right on Crime is that project. We have the State's Trust in our D.C. office, and Life Powered is a project of the Texas Public Policy Foundation that's just talking to people about how we are ending poverty around the world because we're ending energy poverty. Mm-hmm. We're already starting to see some of these policies of the Green New Deal play themselves out around the world. In Germany in particular, they've decided they're going to go renewable. Well, look at their electric costs. Their electric costs have gone up 50%. But they're still 3 times what we pay here in the United States. Could you imagine your electric bills tripling what they are today? Or in Spain, they're 4 times what they are now. So I think I'm paying a little bit, around $100 a month on my electric bill. I could not imagine paying $400 a month for electricity.
Well, hold it. Isn't Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez going to fix this with her Green New Deal?
Well, unfortunately, it's not going to get fixed. All it's going to do is we're going to eliminate the poor, because everyone is going to be poor.
Oh, well, that's, at least we can feel better about ourselves.
Yeah, we'll all feel good because we're all poor. We don't have access to electricity. What we're seeing around the world, as we get more people access to energy, poverty goes down. When we eliminate energy poverty, we eliminate poverty. People have longer life expectancies. Their nutrition increases. Illiteracy rates drop. Good things happen when people get access to reliable, affordable energy. And what we're doing now in this country, we're a net exporter for the first time ever. A lot of that fuel coming from Texas around the world. We're exporting our freedom around the world.
Well, and you mentioned something, Jason Isaacs from the Texas Public Policy Foundation. Of course, I'm with the the Virginia Public Policy Initiative as well here, but and I want to bring some of your thoughts to them as well. But energy independence, the inexpensive nature of our energy is what drives and fuels our liberty. It makes it possible for us to continue where no representative republic or democracy has survived as long as ours has.
That's right. We had, T. Boone Pickens used to call it the greatest transfer of wealth when we were buying oil from the Middle East repeatedly, billions of barrels of oil, and now that's reversed.
But our public policy, our international policy is better too, because now we can help our neighbors, our British neighbors, our Israeli neighbors, where, if we had to buy oil, well, they had to buy oil too, and now we're all kind of in the same, pardon the phrase, barrel.
Correct. And Poland is no longer being held hostage by Russia because we're actually exporting liquefied natural gas from the Gulf Coast to Poland to help provide them with good, reliable, affordable, clean energy.
Where can people find you online, Jason?
Lifepowered.org, or I'm on Twitter at Isaac for Texas, all spelled out.
All right. Well, I really appreciate seeing you here, meeting you in person.
Pleasure.
I appreciate it. And thank you for joining us for this week's special CPAC presentation of Freedom and Prosperity Radio for all of us here at the Virginia Institute for Public Policy. My name is Joe Thomas. So long, and thanks for all the fish.